All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good evening. And good evening to, we have a large amount of people live streaming, so we're all on camera. But we really appreciate you all being here tonight at about, what is it, almost 6:30, 6:40 here. So good evening. I'm Marina Dmitrievich, the state director of the Wisconsin Working Families Party. And I'm really, happy to be here. 10 months ago, we were in the same room and a few of you people were here when we launched the Wisconsin's Choice program. And in fact, we had many candidates at that time and many tables, and we all went around and did a speed dating conversation. And look where we are now. An exciting time to be in Wisconsin and to be set up to help really turn out the vote and make a change. So I want to give you a few updates here. We had, as you may know, over 5,000 people from all over the state take the pledge this last round to put in 10 hours of work to make a difference in November. And one really great way to continue to fulfill that pledge, many of you have already signed up, is to come to our office in Working Families Party, 413 North 2nd Street. But you can sign up by doing that with our volunteers here to come and do phone banking. And so I just want to give a little shout out to our volunteers with the clipboards. I want to ask you to sign up to help out and do more pledge phone banking as we continue along this amazing project. This people-powered project, okay, we got our three, let's put our hands up. Live streamers can sign up online at wechoose.org. So make sure that you do that tonight. We'll be passing those around. This is a people-powered program. How many P's can I say, right? And that's what it's all about, and that's how we're really going to take back our state in November. And so we really, truly thank you. Other people that we want to thank real quick before we get going is we need to thank our brothers and sisters at AFSCME. Again, here from the beginning, thank you. When we had this event 10 months ago to now, to being the hardworking men and women that hold up this important public infrastructure throughout the state of Wisconsin. So we really want to thank AFSCME for hosting us once again. Lastly about the pledges, I have to hit it again. The 5,000 people putting over 10 hours in over the next 2 months, when you think about that, think about the impact. And I guess that's what I want to leave you with before I introduce John Nichols, is in this election, we can all do the basic. We can get out to vote, which is incredibly important, but get out your friends, knocking on doors, texting, phone banking. That is what is going to make the difference. And we've seen across the nation these elections come down to hundreds, tens, percentage points, and it's made different in the impact that's made by just one person. Like, gone are the days where you feel that you might not have an impact. The yard sign, the phone banking, the texting, it all makes a difference. So again, I want to ask you to continue to sign up those pledge sheets and ask even more people to do it. We've got the people power. We just need to stay not only organized, but energized and mobilized. And with that, we have a very energetic host tonight who's been with us from the beginning. Someone who is organized, energized, and mobilized, and that is John Nichols. You know him because he's been such an important voice in Wisconsin, especially for the values that we align with. And he'll be moderating our forum tonight. John Nichols is a really amazing, well-known, quite famous actually, author, and also works with The Nation as well as Cap Times. And so I'm going to hand it off to him, and he will really get the party started. Thank you all for coming. John?
So much. Thank you. Another hand for Marina. I'm not going to say a lot up front, but I will tell you that what we're gathering to do tonight is important. 60 years ago in Wisconsin, the Democratic Party had lost every race for governor since 1932. They were on a losing streak that was epic in character. And they had lost just about every other race as well. 1958, they couldn't even find a candidate for governor. They were struggling. They finally found a liberal state senator out of Madison. Right now I say, oh, we can't have anybody from Madison run for anything, right? And his lieutenant governor candidate was, he was a cranberry grower, but he had actually gone off to Washington, D.C. and ended up becoming Harry Truman's advisor on Native American issues, and then evolved from that to be Harry Truman's advisor on civil rights. The running mate was the guy who told Harry Truman that he should integrate the military and that he should back fair employment protections, that he should move the Democratic Party out of the shadow of states' rights and into the sunlight of human rights. So this is a very progressive ticket. It was a ticket that everybody wrote off. And then in November of that year, this remarkably progressive ticket won. And Gaylord Nelson became the governor of Wisconsin, first Democrat since 1932. And Phileo Nash, a civil rights campaigner, became the lieutenant governor of Wisconsin. And within months of taking office, they enacted Wisconsin's statewide protections for public employees, collective bargaining for public employees. And we gather in an AFSCME hall tonight in a state where AFSCME was founded and where working class people have struggled for generations to make sure that public employees are respected and protected. 60 years on from an election that guaranteed their rights. Tonight, we're going to listen to a couple of candidates and figure out whether they are prepared to be as visionary and transformational as Gaylord Nelson and Phileo Nash. So please, a round of applause for the people who've organized what we're doing tonight. A round of applause for AFSCME, our public employees union that has worked so hard for so long. A round of applause for the civil rights campaigners in this city and in this state that have led Wisconsin in the proper direction. And a round of applause for our two candidates who've come to join us this evening. They'll speak separately initially just to introduce themselves to you. You know them. But tonight we'll spend a good deal of time talking to them. Some of you will ask questions. And I first will introduce Tony Evers. Now, you know him as your state superintendent of public instruction. Before that, he was a school superintendent, a teacher. And interestingly enough, he's one of the people who's probably least political in our statewide politics. In fact, I can honestly say, and it's not you can tell us more about this if you want. I can honestly say I didn't know whether Tony was a Democrat or a Republican before he decided to run for the Democratic nomination for governor of Wisconsin. Now that's not to criticize. It's to say sometimes he was more progressive than an awful lot of Democrats. And so I wasn't sure exactly where he was coming from. But he just ran an incredible race in the primary for governor of Wisconsin, a race where a lot of people thought it would be close. There were a lot of different, very qualified, very capable candidates, and he won by a landslide. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Democratic nominee for governor of Wisconsin, Tony Evers.
Thanks everybody for being here tonight. I apologize for my voice. It's right on the nub. It's going to be good though. I just want to, first of all, I want to thank the organizations that have done, is this on? Yeah. Okay. I just want to thank the organizations that put this event on tonight, but also put on the event and followed this race closely all the way along. I believe, and I'll just talk about the primary just for a minute, because you all had such an important role that you played in the primary. And that is what, in the primary actually is what's kicked off this race going forward in the general elections. Because you put our feet to the fire, the Democratic candidates. As you may remember, we used to have about 20 people running, and then it came down to about 8 at the very end. But at the end of the day, because people stayed engaged in the primary, we had 8 people going all across the state of Wisconsin every single day, all 8 of us. We were someplace in Wisconsin talking about Wisconsin values, talking about democratic values. And the good news is that race and the way you all put things together, and I'm sure there are people in this room that didn't support me. I get that, but all 8 of us, we're together now. We're unified, and we're going to win this race going forward next November. Now, the reason I think we are the people's choice, Mandela Barnes and myself, is this: well, first of all, look at us, how similar, right? But that aside, we have the issues. We own the issues, whether it's education, whether it's our natural resources, whether it's wages, whether it's health care. All those things are Democratic issues and, frankly, Republican issues. They're Wisconsin issues. Whether you live in Milwaukee or you live in Crandon, Wisconsin, those are the things that people care about. And we're going to be running on that going forward, and we will win. We'll win on the issues. Of course, we're going to hold Scott Walker accountable for his really horrible policies. But at the end of the day, it's going to be around positive Wisconsin values of things that we care about. And I'm so proud to be the Democratic nominee, and thank you so much for getting us to this point. Thank you very much.
Tony Evers. Now, we're in a union hall, and unions organize, they collectively bargain, they do all sorts of great things in our society, but they also teach kids, you little kids, right? How to have some values, how to connect with people, how to be a part of something. And the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor in Wisconsin this year is the grandson of a steel worker, a proud member of the United Steelworkers Union. He is the son of an auto worker, a proud member of the United Auto Workers Union, and he is a former 2-term state representative here in Wisconsin who has been in the forefront of struggles for economic and social justice and racial justice. Please welcome Mandela Barnes.
Thank you all so much for having us. John Nichol, he whispered and asked with my parents here, and luckily my mother is not here because she's an MTA member for long, so that would have been, that could have not gone over very well if she was here. She would have stood boldly to object, but she's not here, so I am Mandela Barnes, former state representative, proud to be your Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor. And I would not be here if it were not for many of the people in this room. And I'll jump to the part about being a people's champion, because this campaign, whether it was the primary, whether it was the campaign before this one, or the campaign before that one, it was never out of big money. It was never like we were the most well-funded candidate. I've been outspending every race I've ever run. And oh well, because we weren't out organized. And that's what this is going to come down to, not only the primary elections that I've been in, but this general election. Governor Walker and his allies have virtually unlimited sums of money, but what we have is people power. We have unlimited potential, but we can't tap that potential unless we actually talk to people. And that means correcting the mistakes of previous election cycles of only running against Governor Scott Walker. We've tried that before. It did not work. This is the time where we actually stand up and talk about a plan to improve the lives of people across the entire state of Wisconsin. That means health care. That means education. That means protecting our environment. All of these issues. And what I talk about, I speak about from a place of experience. I have a healthcare story. I know how important access to quality and affordable healthcare is. I am a proud public school graduate. I know what it means to fully fund our public education and what happens when we don't. And protecting our environment. I grew up with asthma like a lot of other young children do, and you may think it's just a common rare occurrence or a common occurrence just because, but the fact is we have polluters who get away with so much because corporations have written the rules for far too long in this state and in this country. And we have coal burning power plants adjacent to neighborhoods. You see disproportionate outcomes in respiratory illnesses with a lot of young people. And it is that experience that I bring to this race that I feel has not been brought to a statewide campaign before. And it is having a natural connection. I started as a community organizer. I was in the legislature as a community organizer. I ran for lieutenant governor still as a community organizer. I want to be elected still as a community organizer. That means all of us. That means that we see a Wisconsin that's not just open for business, but open for everyone. And I'm so proud to be a part of this campaign, so proud to have you all here with us today. And I am so happy at the fact that we are going to win on November 6th. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for moderation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandela. And let me ask a couple quick questions up front here, and then we're going to start to bring some folks from the crowd in. I was serious, Tony, when I said up front that I didn't really think of you as a Democrat or a Republican. I didn't think of you as somebody who was actually particularly engaged with partisan politics. You held a nonpartisan office. You had plenty of opportunities over the last decade or so to run for governor if you'd wanted to. You chose not to. Why did you choose at this point to run for governor of Wisconsin?
Great question, and it is all about, I've always believed that what's best for our kids is best for our state, and it's the best for our state's economy, best for our state's democracy. And after 8 years of trying to work with Scott Walker, trying to get him to move the needle, especially around funding, especially around equity issues, I decided it was a glass ceiling for folks, and the only way I could make a change is to be governor of the state of Wisconsin. That's where the change happens. Every governor gets 90% of his or her budget passed. That is something that's critically important. If we want to change this state, I had to be governor, period.
And just following that, Tony, in this campaign, Scott Walker, the incumbent governor, has frequently said and has made the point, he says, well, there's times that Tony Evers worked with me. You know, we got along on some things. Why is he criticizing me now? Now, I know that you often raised fundamental issues. I even saw you on the floor of the Capitol when people were protesting back in 2011. But it is a point that Scott Walker makes. You worked across lines.
Yes, and I can still work across lines. I'm a pragmatist at heart. I believe that a governor has to make sure that government works and that it serves the people of the state, period. And all of them. All the people in the state, absolutely. And that is why it's clear there's been a handful of times we've agreed on small things, but in the grand scheme of things, I fought him in the Supreme Court and won. We've won some other venues, but we have this ceiling there where he cannot go beyond, and we have to move beyond it. We have to have fair funding. I'll just say this as an aside. He talks about going forward and how he's moved the state forward. There's still, and this is no surprise to anybody in this room, United Way just completed a study. It showed that 860,000 families in the state of Wisconsin, that's families, and that's working families, cannot afford the basic needs, whether it's rent, whether it's utilities, whether it's childcare, whether it's food. 860,000 families. He's failed. We need to move in a different direction.
One final element there, too. You mentioned that you fought him in court. I think many people here know the story, but quickly, this was one of the most fascinating points of you are often talked about as a mild-mannered guy, a guy who's very even-tempered. But you had quite a battle with Governor Walker over whether you had a right to your own lawyer.
Yeah, hard to believe. And we won that. He took us to court he tried to make some changes around who makes administrative rules in the state, the governor or the state superintendent. Well, we actually won that case, and actually the former Justice Gableman wrote the position.
No liberal he.
And I actually won that against him. That was a couple years ago. Well, they recycled that one more time a couple months ago. And so we're fighting it again. And frankly, this will give you an idea how the Supreme Court works. We won that, but one justice who supported it, he's gone. He retired. That person they appointed then was elected. He's going to oppose it. We're going to lose this time. So we had to make sure. And then the governor said, "Oh, by the way, You don't get to represent yourself in your own self-interest. The Attorney General is going to represent you, and of course, he is in that position to obviously screw things up badly. And we fought that in the Supreme Court, and we actually won that also. And that wasn't a victory for me. That was a victory for all people in the state. Could you imagine going to court and and you being a defendant, and the prosecutor is representing you? There's just no way you're going to win that one. So that was an important win, a huge win. Sorry.
And I'll just add that governors, when there's a vacancy on the Supreme Court, appoint Supreme Court justices, an interesting power as we think about the office. Yes. Mandela Barnes, you were in the state legislature. I followed a lot of those struggles in the Capitol over the recent years. When the right to work issue came up in the legislature, you were a young legislator, and it was a bitter debate, an incredibly tough time. They were trying to close the Capitol and all sorts of, intensity all around. It went through the night. And I was probably one of the 3 people that stayed up all night. Well, actually, probably a lot of working people. I know that Randy Bryce stayed up all night and watched it. But in the middle of the night, you were talking about spiritual issues and moral issues, not just the basics of the legislation. And that's a big part of you. And I'd like you to just give us a sense of why you chose to go there in a debate about labor rights.
So I chose to go that route for a number of reasons. One is that we see too much ground to Republicans on issues, especially like the economy, right? Like we are the only party that's in favor of raising people's wages, which has been shown to improve not only economic security, but economies as a whole. And another debate we often see to Republicans is the moral debate. Which just isn't right, because if you look at, if you study any religious text, right, any major religious text, you'll see that the way that Democrats govern, or liberals' progressive agenda, is all throughout the Bible, right? And workers' rights are actually in the Old Testament, right, from the story of the Exodus, and we went back to Pharaoh. So I took it there. I took it to Pharaoh because that's what it was like. And I looked at Moses as a labor organizer. And it was important to have that debate to just show the hypocrisy of Republicans in the legislature, because they want to use religious texts to promote their own political agenda. But when it comes to actually talking about opportunity, fairness, equality, justice, they ignore those parts. So I felt it was important to share that story to remind them that the story of working people is deeply rooted in the Bible, and by them wanting to take away the rights of working people could not be more anti-religious, could not be more anti-text that they try to use to promote an agenda. So they're wrong on every front, and we have to call them out on that. Somebody has to. And again, like the economy, like religion, like so many other issues, we are on the right side of those issues, and we have to talk about it that way.
And I know you well enough to say that you wouldn't judge somebody else's faith. You wouldn't tell them, their differences, and people interpret things differently. But this is a big deal. For an awful long time, Democrats have tended to be very sterile in their discussions about moral issues, not always putting them up front. And throughout your career, you have sought to put moral issues very much up front. I think, and you tell me, because you believe you can actually win those debates.
We can actually win those debates, and I think that the person who's the best example of that is Reverend William Barber. He takes the debate right to them every time, and he wins. I actually listened to him a whole lot that night or the morning before we were on the floor having that debate. And he is who inspired me to actually take that route, because again, we're talking about actually organizing. If we're going to talk about moral victories, or we're going to talk about organizing in a real way, we're going to talk about doing what's just. Then to do what's just is to do what's right for working people, to do what's right by families, to do what's right by children, and they refuse to do that every time.
Mandela Barnes. Let's go to some questions from folks in the crowd. Is Ingrid Henry Walker here? Where is it? There's Ingrid. Now, Mandela's mom didn't make it over. but you are the vice president of MTEA, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, and Mandela's mom was at my house for Labor Day having barbecue. Love her to death.
Should go anywhere there's food.
So you bring greetings.
I do. So my question, just to tell you a little bit about me, I am an MPS teacher. I've taught in some of the most impoverished schools in Milwaukee. I've stood before the school board begging for opportunity for my child who's in an MPS school, as well as every child across the district, all children in Milwaukee Public Schools. How do we ensure quality public education for all students in Wisconsin, regardless of race, religion, wealth, language, or special education status?
Tony, you've thought a little about these issues.
Let me try that one on. And first of all, thanks so much for the question. It's a critical one. And the important part of the question is around equity. Equity is a wholly different thing than equality. Governor Walker has never got the issue of equity. And in the bottom line, equity means for me, if you need an extra lift, if a kid needs an extra lift, they should get an extra lift. And if that extra lift costs more money, then by golly, you got to have, it's going to cost more money. Simple as that. It's around equity. And I've proposed an equity budget that's another reason I'm running for governor. Every year I've been state superintendent and never got past first base. It is absolutely critical in this state to make sure that my plan is quite simple, and I've laid it out for next year. Now, the good news is, folks, is that usually I would propose the K through 12 budget and then hand it off to the governor, and he'd toss it in the wastebasket, right? This time, I develop my budget, and I hand it off to me, and it's going to happen. All right? This is a record-breaking budget. We're going to increase students with funding for students with disabilities, $600 million, and that is an important issue for Milwaukee area. It's an important issue for people all across the state. We have a legal and moral obligation to students, especially students with disabilities. If we provide that funding that provides some relief in some other areas, it is a critical piece. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to 2/3 funding in the state of Wisconsin. We haven't had that since Tommy Thompson was governor. How about that? 2/3 funding we're going to have. In addition, we're going to make sure that we're spending money on mental health issues. It's clearly an issue in our society. In our schools, it's a critical issue. We're multiplying that number that we had by 10 times. We will change the face of public education in Wisconsin with a pro-education budget. We're going to need your help getting that passed. Thank you.
Let me just follow up here.
But I think, you just talked a lot about money. Okay. You have to have a real discussion.
Well, you can. What do you want? What is the element?
Where's the
that you
money
wanna go
coming
to?
from? Is that the question?
The question is, it's how you tell the story. It's not money.
Okay.
If you say money, the Republicans are going to say so many dollars goes to every Milwaukee student.
I think you made
They're going to say that's why aren't they taking care of it? And you need to say money does this. It brings the values you're talking, and we're going to do this.
Brother, I think you brought your idea in here. It's a good follow-up. He gave me a better follow than I would have given you there.
It's fine. Well, of course, money has to be tied to achievement, and it's been shown. Research shows that all the time. I'll give a small example. In Milwaukee Public Schools, we have 4-year-old kindergarten where they have 39 kids per class. Obviously, who in the world could? First of all, God bless those teachers, right? But the point of the issue is, with more money, we can lower class sizes. We can have with more money, we can, and especially in the special education arena, we can provide better services, more complete services. With mental health money, we can take, obviously trauma is an impact on our kids, and we know that poverty brings that along. With mental health services, we can eliminate that trauma going forward. Small examples. Yes, I understand what you're saying. I was just giving a short answer to a more complex question here.
I think that was a good follow. Let me keep going here for a little bit, and I promise you, folks, these guys are going to stick around too. So we'll have some more time. But let's move. We got some folks have set up to ask some questions, and I want to get there. But I want to follow on one quick thing with what you're saying. You said a record-breaking budget.
Right.
I think that this gentleman and other folks will say, "Boy, if you're saying record-breaking budget, that's going to scare people."
Well,
right? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, Foxconn was a record-breaking thing. The budget's always about priorities. It always has been and always will be. Every year, Walker's budgets have increased by lots of millions of dollars. We'll just make sure that this is a priority. It's as simple as that. We will close loopholes where we have to. We'll find efficiencies where we'll have to. But we value something in the state, and it is education, and it hasn't been valued in the past. Walker took $800 million out of it when he first came to office during Act 10. We've never caught back up. We are behind where we were 8 years ago. That is the bottom line.
Mandela Barnes, Governor Walker just attacked or criticized your running mate for not closing the racial achievement gap in education in Wisconsin. Is that a fair criticism?
No, I think that was the first time the governor has ever mentioned race before. So it's not fair at all. It's something he's ignored for a very, very long time. If you look at the incarceration, it's just say he's never visited a state prison before because he saw no value in it. And we have the highest black male incarceration rate in the state of Wisconsin. So no, it's not a fair criticism because it's the first time he ever wants to talk about it. Two, anytime we've ever put up any proposal, I served on the Urban Education Committee, the Education Committee. Nothing has ever come out of any conversation we've ever had on that topic. And I cannot point to any moment where Governor Walker ever addressed the Black and Latino caucus about working to address this issue. He is the governor. And ultimately, he signs the budget that Tony Evers puts on his desk. That was then. This is now.
Let me ask you one quick other thing before we take another question for the crowd here, and that is somebody in the crowd made a good point. They said, we always measure ourselves against other states, but we're in a global economy. In many ways, the real measures we have to make are beyond just whether we're ahead of Mississippi. As a governor, how would you do that?
Well, first of all, we have to value the teaching profession. You think about Walker when he entered office. He said, "We're going to divide and conquer. We're going to pit public employees, teachers, whomever against the rest of the state." Obviously, it impacted collective bargaining. But at the end of the day, what it's done is it's driven people out of the profession, prevented young people from coming into the profession, and they spend all their time dumbing down the qualifications for the profession. There is no industry, there's no enterprise, private or public, that is going to move forward when you've diminished the people that work in that organization. It just doesn't work that way. And we're going to change that going forward, whether it's around Act 10 or whether it's around making sure that our schools are adequately funded.
Excellent. And one last question for Mandela here before, and that is, you're a product of the Milwaukee Public Schools. Does it matter to have somebody who came out of the Milwaukee Public Schools in a top statewide office?
Oh, absolutely.
How might that impact it?
MPS is probably the most attacked school district. And people point all the time, say, "Oh, well, all these failing schools." And I casually remind people that there's no such thing as a failing school, only a failed community. So it comes back to addressing root causes, making sure that students are showing up to school on level playing field, making sure that students are having their health needs addressed, because that doesn't happen. And I would say, even to the question I was asked of Tony about, how do we make high achieving schools, I will say that the overwhelming majority of schools offer high quality education. The problem is students are under resourced outside of the classroom. When they show up to class, you bring those issues into the classroom. It impacts the way you learn. I say it all the time. You show up to school on an empty stomach, chances are the way you learn and process information is going to be much different than your counterparts. Milwaukee has a 1 out of 19 student homeless rate. It means over 5% of the student population that's showing up at a significant disadvantage. If we don't take care of those problems first, then we're not really serious about changing the conversation in education.
Yeah, and I just have to add to that, especially sitting here in Milwaukee, the most impoverished zip code in the state of Wisconsin, obviously, is 53206. There is not one quality early childhood program in that zip code. Not one. We know how important early childhood education is. Scott Walker has done nothing about that issue in 8 years. My first budget will have a high quality early childhood program set up in that zip code that pays people a living wage, and anybody that wants to get into it gets in for free, period.
Tony Evers. Is John McCrae Jones here? Where's John? Hey, there you are. UWM student. What year are you in at UWM?
I'm a sophomore at UWM.
What are you gonna be?
I'm a political science major, so maybe a state senator one day.
Oh,
Something
man,
like that.
there you go. All right.
Maybe governor.
Maybe governor.
What's your question, my friend?
My question is, I have a two-part question. What will you do to increase college affordability? Because, tuition is. And what policies will you pursue that gives me a chance of getting not just a job, but a good job that allows me to stay in Wisconsin?
Good question. Tony, you're on the State Board of Regents, but it's been a lonely, UW Board of Regents has been a lonely position for you there, hasn't it?
Amen. Yes, I'm on the Board of Regents because I'm state superintendent, and I'm the only non-Scott Walker appointee on that board. And I have seen over the years I've been on the Board of Regents a diminishment of the amount of money that the state puts into it. Yes, we've frozen tuition. It's too high the way it is. But the state's share has gone down and down and down. In addition, the Board of Regents, I just have to tell this story. It's not a money issue, but it gives you an idea where the Board of Regents are coming from. They passed this last year, what they call a freedom of speech policy for you as a student, which would insert the Board of Regents in disciplining you or expelling you from school for speaking your mind. Now think about that. And when that Board of Regents passed that on a 18-1 vote against, the kickoff was, and this was up at UW Stout, and we had I'd say 20 students sitting in the front row talking or protesting, and what they had was tape over their mouth, and they were standing there. They didn't say anything. And when the discussion was kicked off about this to take away students' freedom of speech, it was said we need to do this so that we have better relationship with the Republican legislature. Think of the mindset of that you would take away a right to speech in order to take directions directly from this Republican legislature. I'll never forget that as long as I live. We'll change that. What first thing we're going to do is we're going to replace some of those Board of Regent members that don't care about freedom of speech. We're also going to take care, thank you. We're also going to, and it's going to be in my budget, and we are going to actually increase state aid to the University of Wisconsin system. We will absolutely do that. Instead of years of decline, we're going to have some things go up. And also, at the end of the day, we will be asking for first 2 years at any university or the technical college system to be half of what it is, but any student that can't afford it, it should be free. And we can do that. There's enough money in the state to make that happen. I'll tell you that we talk about Foxconn and the problems with Foxconn and how that impacts our state. The most important economic development tool that we have in our toolbox is making sure that our higher education institutions are strong, period. It has to be a top priority for us. So that's the money piece. There's a second part of your question that I've misplaced.
jobs.
Oh, jobs.
Pursued that gives me a chance of getting not just a job, but a good job that allows me to stay inside Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to make sure. Yes, we have to make sure that we have a state that actually welcomes young people and doesn't drive them out. I have a millennial who said, "I'm out of here. Enough of this divide and conquer stuff." He lives in Florida, of all places. What a mistake that was. Yeah, it's breathtaking. But yes, we have to have a state that's friendly to people and go back to those Wisconsin values so that we make sure that people want to stay here and they want you to be here. But also, it's important to have a well-rounded education. And yes, career preparation is very, very important. But I will tell you that, in my opinion, and a lot of business owners, one of the most important skills that we have to continue to have is making sure that young people think critically, are able to collaborate, all those people skills that frankly are found in the humanities. We have to have humanities be part of our higher education institutions instead of pushing it aside.
Tony, you had a fight as a member of the Board of Regents just recently that relates to that issue, and that is on the consolidation of the higher education in Wisconsin. We just heard today that as many as 70 folks could be laid off at UW-Stevens Point. I hope I've got the detail right. And so we are actually seeing, at least in some parts of the state, what looks like a downsizing.
Oh, absolutely.
Higher education.
Well, there is a basic problem. We have fewer people going into the system, but the real problem is we don't value a wide range in liberal arts education. We have to value that. That's what makes young people into good adults. That is part of our responsibility, and that means we have to have more money. I know UW-Stevens Point tried to portray that as, we're focusing on different careers or STEM careers and all that. All that's important. We want people to be good adults too. We absolutely do, and that's why we need the money to make sure that we keep the professors we have. And frankly, we also have to pay them more too.
Mandela Barnes, do you got any student debt?
Actually, not right now. I don't.
Good.
I don't. I bit the bullet, and the extra money I had.
Mic up so people can hear that.
Sorry, I bit the bullet, and the extra money that I had, I made sure I just wanted to get rid of it because I didn't want to.
Paid off your student debt.
I did. I've decided to forego some other expenses, and I did pay it off.
But
Full transparency.
that's good. And there are folks who can. But
wasn't easy.
I'm going to bet there are quite a few folks that you know who do carry a substantial amount of student debt. Is there anything that you folks are proposing in that regard?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we've both talked about refinancing student loan debt. That's the big thing, right? And I always throw that piece in there that we should be able to borrow money at the same rate that big banks get to borrow money.
And also, on the jobs component of it, that jobs component is a huge deal, right? Because that transition out of college into a good job in Wisconsin, are there ideas that you folks have in regard to job creation, or at least that sort of lifelong training for jobs and things related to that?
So I'll say we're about 33% behind other states when it comes to job creation. I was just reading the study. Urban Milwaukee put it out. But if you look across this entire country, in 2016 to 17 alone, jobs in the renewable energy sectors where the growth was happening. I mean, that's just all across the board. But 2016 through 17 specifically, jobs in solar energy grew up about 24.6%. Jobs in wind energy grew about 16%. And so we are really missing out on a real opportunity to not only catch up with the times, not only to protect the environment, but also provide living wage jobs to the people across this state. We have a very anti-science government right now. We have a governor who's not willing to accept that climate change is real. We have one oil refinery in this state in Superior, and if you look earlier this year, there were multiple explosions at that facility, and that should have been a literal and figurative alarm for us all that we need to change the way that we produce energy in this state. And we can be a leader. We can be a leader, but it takes a leader to get us to that position, and we don't have one.
I've got, is Annie Wacker here? Annie? Oh, there we go. Look at you. You popped up with the microphone. Annie Wacker from AFSCME.
Yes.
And tell us, where have you worked in your career?
I worked at Milwaukee Public Schools for a number of years. I was the president of the local that represented the clerical and support staff. I'm also a proud parent of 4 MPS graduates. And then I work currently at the Milwaukee Area Labor Council as a community services liaison. So I work with United Way and other community organizations.
And you've got a question for us about wages.
Yes, as is being destroyed and disappearing in the state of Wisconsin, often as a direct result of Act 10. What is it that you plan to do to help hopefully repeal, but if not able to repeal, executive orders or legislatively as it relates to Act 10, so that public employees are able to organize, and not only for their benefit, but to, as we discussed earlier, we're very much more concerned about the impact that Act 10 has had upon the individuals that we serve. As you're well aware, public employees don't become public employees to become rich, but we do hope to have a decent living.
We will propose a repeal of Act 10. I was against it. I marched against it. I spoke against it. My wife is a union thug. All those things. All those things are part of my.
I've met your wife. I'm not sure.
Yeah, she's a union thug, or she was. She's retired now. But so that sets the stage. We will ask for a repeal of Act 10. I'd love to say it's going to happen. I don't know if it will, but if it comes back and it's on my desk, we'll sign it. I believe in collective bargaining. I have bargained on both sides of the table. I was a TEA, Toma Education Association bargainer when I was a teacher, and I bargained on behalf of school boards when I was in administration. So I get how it should work, and it can work, and it can work for everybody, and especially now you talked about in particular about the people that public employees serve, whether it's kids or whether it's people in nursing homes or whether it's in our correctional institutions. We have to find ways. So say Act 10 doesn't appear on my desk, and I don't have a chance to sign it because it's not there. We have an opportunity to start talking about how services have been harmed in the state of Wisconsin. What sort of how young people in prison are in because of overcrowding, because of lack of staff, all the issues that frankly AFSCME stands for, and it is about issues that relate to safety. It's about the way we can't provide the services necessary. Unions should be able to bargain those issues, and we're going to talk about that during the campaign, and we're going to talk about it after the campaign. It is critical that we put the people of Wisconsin in a position to understand how the services are delivered in Wisconsin and how, frankly, Act 10 has affected those services. That's critical for the conversation.
Mandela Barnes, this is a heart and soul issue for you. You come out of a trade union family, and Act 10 was a big part of these struggles, but when you came into legislature, you were also dealing with right to work and a host of other efforts to diminish the rights of labor. If indeed your ticket is elected, what can you do, and how would you focus on some of those broader issues for labor rights?
Right. So I look at it the way that we organize outside of the building. Now we get to organize inside of the building, and I talked about, even in the primary, any other campaign I've ever run, I've talked about the need to bring rights back to working people, but not just bring rights back to working people, give a voice back to working people, and to have that voice inside of the Capitol. I wouldn't have spent many cold days outside the Capitol marching and protesting. And understanding that organizing, it's a long-term strategy. We know firsthand that we don't get what we want right when we want it. What we have can be taken away in an instant. We do know that, but it is a long march towards justice, and we are going to do this together. And so, I mean, my commitment is the same. That hasn't changed since 2011, or it hasn't changed since before 2011. But when Act 10 happened in 2011, my commitment remains the same. And we got to do whatever we take, or we got to do whatever it takes to make sure that we get back to a place where the voice of working people is restored. It makes government work better. It makes our economy work better. It's just overall better for the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah. And I believe we have an excellent opportunity here. This is primarily private sector issues, but not all. But I think we can roll back right to work. That issue is important for both employers and employees. In addition, I think the issue around prevailing wages, where they got rid of that, that is an issue for employers and employees. There were Republicans that voted against their conscience when they voted to do right to work and do away with prevailing wages. Having a Democratic governor will free them to do the right thing, and I think that can happen.
Is Latoya White here? There's Latoya. Hey, there you are.
Hello.
And folks, I think Mandela knows Tony May as well. Latoya has been organizing as a community organizer, community activist for more than a decade here in Milwaukee, and also a member, I think, a member of SEIU, or at least
was a member of
former
SEIU.
member of SEIU, Service Employees International Union.
Yes,
You've got
I
a
was
question.
there with Act 10, out there with Mandela, out there in the cold marching. So, definitely. As a community member and as an African American living in Milwaukee, I've seen my family and my neighbors treated unfairly by the criminal justice system in all different ways. And I want to know, what would you do to ensure my civil rights and fair treatment to my community by the law? What would you guys propose to do?
Thank you, Latoya. Tony?
Great question. And I'll just talk about it first at a 30,000-foot level. I think the governor, the state of Wisconsin, absolutely has to take a lead on the issue of racial inequality in the state. There is, I understand. We're working on this in my day job at the Department of Public Instruction. It is so critical for people to deal with the issues of racism head on. It's all personal. I get that. It's what's in here and what's in here. But if the governor of the state of Wisconsin doesn't acknowledge that there is a problem about racism in the state, he or she shouldn't be governor. And that's another reason I'm running, because I will acknowledge it. I see it in our schools. That said, correctional institutions, corrections is a big problem. There are people that are serving time in jail for things that if I did it, I wouldn't be, and because they have a different color skin, they are in jail. That is the truth. We have to change the correctional institutions in a major way. We need to make sure that nonviolent offenders have an opportunity to be rehabilitated. Incarceration is not the answer, especially for nonviolent criminals. We have to be able to say to people, whether it's a drug court or another diversion program, we need to make sure that if you are nonviolent, that you can be rehabilitated and enter back into society. That has to happen. And even Republicans get that. Texas has gotten rid of 5 full prisons. What they've done is invested in rehabilitation, and they found that for every dollar they spend in rehabilitation, they save $9. Well, that $9 can be folded back into the system to minimize the caseloads of parole and probation officers and do the right thing for people. We need to be very, very solid on this issue. I know the governor just released an ad today saying, if Evers is elected, criminals are going to be running in the street and people are going to be hurt and all that kind of stuff. We've all heard that before. We've never said that violent people should be released from prison. All we're saying is we have to make sure that nonviolent offenders have a way to be rehabilitated. That will make sure that the present prison system works. rehabilitation happening there. But more importantly, people that are not a threat to society can get back to work.
Yes.
Period. Thank you.
Can I just add this? This is why I'm just happy to be a part of this ticket. I don't think we've ever had a candidate for governor in the general election that's ever been willing to even talk about these issues, let alone be willing to take it on.
Let me follow up there for just on a couple of elements of this. One of the most powerful things I saw during the 2016 campaign was it was back in 2015. It was a small town in New Hampshire, an overwhelmingly white audience in a relatively rural place. And Bernie Sanders got up and spoke for a substantial amount of time about Black Lives Matter and about racial justice issues. And one of the things he said was he felt that one of the most important things he could do was when he was speaking in a small town, in a outstate place, to put these issues on the agenda. Would you do that as governor?
Absolutely, and I've done it as state superintendent, and it's not always a popular thing. But it is so important. If we want this state to thrive, by the time I'm 6 feet under, my skin will be a minority skin, right? Our state is changing, and it's changing for the better. Diversity makes us better. Diversity makes us better, and whatever we have to do to change that mindset in the state of Wisconsin, the governor has to play a role in that. He just can't ignore it.
Mandela, when we talk about these issues, criminal justice issues, you've seen them head on in Milwaukee. You've seen them around the state. The Lincoln Hills issue has been a huge issue in the legislature. It hasn't yet kind of become central to the governor's race, but it may. Talk to us a little bit about that, because that's obviously something you've been thinking about for a long time.
Right. So I served as the ranking Democrat on the Committee on Corrections, and Representative Evan Goyke and myself, we visited Lincoln Hills once the story broke, and of course we were told everything was fine. Right. But common sense told us nothing was fine there. And we got this really glossy tour. It's like we had to give advance warning that we were on the way. I wish we could have just popped up one day, but we weren't able to do that. But the fact is, issues like that in juvenile corrections. I mean, think about adult corrections where there are still other issues. If you have a governor that won't even visit a correctional facility because he didn't see any value in it, that means it's something that has been ignored for far too long. And former Department of Corrections Secretary Ed Wall, who told us things were fine, now wrote in his book that things weren't fine, has talked about the governor's neglect on this issue. And so we have nobody but the governor to blame, because it is a failure of leadership. And if we have, and again, these are juvenile offenders, and the overwhelming majority of adult offenders are not serving life sentences. So we have to get really serious about rehabilitation. But even for our younger offenders, we have to be even more serious about rehabilitation, because these are younger people who are coming back, and some of them are going to be going back to school. Some of them need to have a path towards higher education. I met with a young man when I was in Madison at Dane County Correctional, and he said, well, once I got out, I got off the bus, and I basically knew I was going back in because I didn't have any plan. I didn't have any path. There was nothing for me to do. And that is like the key element to any correction system is the rehabilitation portion. Is something that hasn't been taken seriously. It's not a warehouse, right? You don't just put people there and just let them out after a certain amount of time. You have to, if you're going to incarcerate people, you have to prepare them to come back into society.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of cycle this back to the Act 10 conversation. I feel confident that the correctional officers at Lincoln Hills, if they had some bargaining rights, the issues of this would have come out a lot sooner. I mean, the people that work there actually care for those kids. I want to make sure that they do well. The fact that those rights had been taken away and that their ability to talk about what was happening was gone. That is critical. I'll just cycle back to that again. The ability for the people that serve the people of Wisconsin in the services that are represented by organized labor, they care about who they're taking care of, whether it's a social worker, whether it's a correctional officer. They need a voice in this. And that voice has been absolutely missing.
Yeah, that's another thing too. The Department of Corrections people can't keep staff as well. They can't hire new people. It is a challenge to hire new people. And I remember when the department we had a presentation and they showed us employment trends, and it showed just a steep drop after 2011. People either early resignations. People who just early retirements as well, and a lack of hiring. I was like, well, you see this is happening in 2011. You see the steep drop, and they're shocked that it was 2011 when these early retirements and these resignations happened. It's like you do understand that this is literally exactly when Act 10 happened, that people stopped wanting to work for this department because it's a challenge. It's hard. That is not easy work. I can imagine that is very difficult and stressful work. You have people working so much overtime because there's not enough staff, and it creates a very volatile situation. We have people who are basically forced to work because there are no other people to assume those shifts.
Let me move you on to a couple more issues I just want to touch on, but really vital ones. First off, do you both believe in climate change?
Yes.
All right.
We will accept the climate change accords as the state of Wisconsin as a goal. Absolutely. And I know you wanted to be a quick question, but this cycles back to what we just talked about, and that is having people, state employees, invested in their work. And the Department of Natural Resources, the scientists are gone, right? The few that are left, if they want to testify about a bill that they know is important to the state of Wisconsin, using science, yes, we should believe in science, what a unique thing. They have to take time off and, frankly, fear for their jobs to go testify about their knowledge about an issue, about a potential law. That is, and talk about freedom of the speech. And again, it's the people that are doing the work for the state of Wisconsin have been muzzled.
And it sounds like that for both of you, there is a real desire, if I'm right, and make sure I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's a desire to have state employees, to have people who are experts in areas like the environment, like healthcare, like education, to be encouraged to speak up and maybe even to challenge even what you might be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens in our department. They challenge me regularly. And I'm okay with that. You got to be open. But the bottom line is, as I said before, being a governor is about a visionary thing, and I get it, and we have a good vision. Mandela and I are on the right side of the issues. But it's also about delivering services to people. People pay taxes in the state, and they should get good services. And I can tell you, I've said this every place in Wisconsin, we're actually going to have people that run those departments that know what they're doing. They know what they're doing.
Radical concept.
Whether it's corrections or transportation. I mean, for those of you who read it in the paper, transportation is a good example. The former Department of Transportation Secretary under Scott Walker, his first one that was there for several years, he came out and said, essentially, Walker has been misstating the truth, or I guess you could flip that, lied, about issues around transportation that he advocated for. He's gone, right? They bring in somebody else that knows nothing about the system, and now you see it playing out in our roads and mass transit and all those things. We have to have smart, capable people, regardless of their persuasion, regardless of their party. We need good people running these departments.
Mandela Barnes, how are you going to solve the healthcare crisis?
Well, we solved the healthcare crisis by taking the Badger Care, or taking the Medicaid expansion, expanding Badger Care in the state. Tony's talked about a public option, which would go a very long way for people, which would help drive down costs for consumers. But even on top of that, we have to hold drug companies accountable for the rising cost of prescription drugs, which is driving up the cost of healthcare as a whole. I mean, it's a very simple fix. You know, some states are getting it right. we just aren't. And you look at Minnesota, where they pay significantly less than we pay for health insurance, and that is a real problem. And it's one of the reasons why their economy is performing better than ours too. People, just like student loan debt. I mean, people have extra money that they don't have to spend on health insurance when they don't have to. It's a political decision that the governor made. Same reason he rejected the high-speed rail money. It was a political decision because he wanted to run for president, and it didn't work out for any of us.
Yeah, for sure.
How does that Badger Care expansion? How does it work? I know, and we could take the next several hours to describe it. But Tony, why don't you give us a sense on what you're?
In a sense, it's taking the money to begin with, but we have the right to set those exchanges up the way we want to, and if we want to include a public option, we can do that. We have to figure out the best way to do that. But I am committed. Both of us are committed to making sure that happens. The other thing too that is a healthcare issue, and it's kind of wonky, but I'll tell you, we have to have more transparency in costs in this state around what costs what. A small example, Gunderson Clinic in La Crosse and the hospital they're affiliated with, they were charging $50,000 per knee replacement. And surprisingly enough, other than childbirth-related surgeries, that's the most common surgery that's done now, knee replacements. Go figure. But they were charging $50,000, and the insurance companies started to press back at them after a while and said, "How do you know that it does cost $50,000?" And they went back and brought the bean counters in and followed everybody for a couple days. It actually cost $12,000. How about some transparency in cost? That transparency will make us free, and I believe we can reduce costs just by cost comparisons and making sure that everybody knows what things cost. And the system is so complex now, people don't understand it. I don't understand it either, for God's sakes. I have good health insurance. We have lots of co-pays and things like that. But if you ask me, I had 2 relatively benign wrist surgeries over the last couple of years. I have no idea how much it costs. I have no idea if it would have cost less if I went someplace else. Once we have that transparency, we can drive down costs also.
Can the state mandate that?
They're doing that in California right now. And, to great chagrin and distress of the healthcare industry. But, yeah, the state of California is doing that right now.
Mandela Barnes, we're told that Foxconn is going to, that it's this transformational moment, that it is how Wisconsin will kind of get ahead of the 21st century. You've been critical of the deal. What do you have against the 21st century?
That's right. Yeah, Mandela.
Yeah, I know. It's so just counterintuitive because the governor does not govern as if it was the 21st century, whether it's in terms of women's rights, whether it's in terms of racial justice, whatever the issue is. But the fact is, they want to say that Foxconn is going to create the next Silicon Valley, which just isn't true. Because you can't just create the next Silicon Valley. You have to create the conditions that make a Silicon Valley possible. That means investing in mass transportation. That means investing in higher education, none of which the governor has done. So we're literally putting the cart before the horse here. And that means it's going to be a failure. It's going to be best case scenario. Foxconn is not a good deal. Even if they fulfill every requirement, the state is going to be on the hook for so much money that could have gone to funding, whether it's free 2-year technical college, funding job training programs, or funding our mass transportation infrastructure. So I'm against being taken advantage of. That's the problem. Foxconn was just an awful deal, and the money could have been much better spent in other ways. That is what we should all be against.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody in this room, anybody that might be listening to this broadcast could have cut a better deal than Scott Walker did. You think about $4.5 billion, maybe $5 billion. It keeps going up. The expectations keep going down. The problem is it's part of state law, and so we will do what we can. But in turn, we have to hold their feet to the fire. bottom line. I'll use it. Let's compare the Milwaukee Bucks arena to Foxconn just for a minute. Very controversial, right? Public money, private money, owners, whatever. But the bottom line is the people that own the Bucks made a commitment to this community that 30% of the businesses hired would be either women-owned corporations or minority-owned operations. They also made the same commitment around apprentices and number of workers. They met and exceeded every single one of those. You know what Foxconn was asked to do? Good faith. Good faith. And this is a company where, frankly, people jump off the roof in China. We told them, just do what you can. No. They should have those high. I have those high expectations for them, just like we did for the Milwaukee Bucks. We need to hold their feet to the fire on that issue. We need to hold their feet to the fire on the environmental issues. I don't even think they asked for that. I think that was just given to them so that others in the state can say, "Me too, me too." Different corporation. That's in Wisconsin. We also want that deal on the environmental, to pass on the environmental stuff. I don't think Foxconn even asked for that. I think that was a gift from Scott Walker to the other corporations in the state. We can change that. We have some leverage over those folks. We can stop building the roads. We can slow down that process. We can do lots of things. We need to hold their feet to the fire. Yes, it has the possibility of having good paying jobs. We should require that to happen. I'm skeptical, as is Mandela, that we will, at the end of the day, a few years down the road, all those production jobs will be robotized and those people will be laid off. But the fact of the matter is, we have to hold their feet to the fire. For example, if there are production jobs, why, for $5 billion, why wouldn't we expect Foxconn to have public transportation from Milwaukee to the plant, or from Kenosha, or from Racine? They owe us big time, and we have to hold their feet to the fire.
Let me follow up on one thing there. Wise fellow in the audience before we were talking was saying that one of the mistakes that we make is that in so many of these debates, we measure ourselves against Illinois or even Minnesota rather than recognizing that really we're at a point now where we are competing with the whole world. And it seems to me that in the Foxconn discussion, we've kind of gotten a dumbed down version of what we should be doing, which is we should be talking as a state about how we do education, healthcare, all of these issues with an eye toward creating a 21st century economy. What would you do as governor to make that happen?
Well, first of all, we have to stop doing Hail Mary passes for these big projects. We met with a number of young entrepreneurs today that were from diverse communities across Milwaukee, and their story is this: they can create more jobs, and we should be doing that all across the state of Wisconsin, just not Milwaukee. The second, or people that are 3 or 4 years in after a startup, all they're looking for is some help, and frankly, a lot of the help that they talked about that they needed is health care. Because they couldn't afford it themselves, or their employees couldn't afford it. We had one young man who was his solution to the healthcare crisis for him was to take yoga classes, right? That's where we are as a state, where a young entrepreneur has to choose between healthcare and having his corporation or his company move forward. And to do that, he's doing yoga instead of having healthcare. We need to be investing in those smaller operations that we know are successful, that all they need is a hand. And frankly, it can be done locally and regionally. We actually have to go back to a little bit more local control in the state of Wisconsin. The local control party used to be the Republicans, right? Guess what happened? No way. They took away local control around the issues of roads. They took it away as frack mining. They took it away as it relates to solar and wind energy, all those issues that are important to this state. local control is diminished. We're going to bring that back, and we're going to bring that back when it comes to economic development. It has to be around Main Street businesses, small entrepreneurs, young people who are struggling, but all they need is, frankly, not money. They just need a helping hand at the local bank. That money stays locally, circulates around, and increases the economy for everybody.
Mandela, are you still 31? Yeah, at some point you're going to be 30
We are 48 and a half years old.
by average. And
I love that.
but you've grown up in a tech savvy, increasingly robotified, changing society. How would you, as a part of this administration, try to make sure that Wisconsin really is looking at that whole new world that's coming at us and think about it more than I think we have in recent years?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the new economy is here. Mm-hmm. I mean, by many measures, it's passing Wisconsin, but we have a wonderful, a very strong tech entrepreneurial community in the state of Wisconsin. They have to be a part of the conversations. We can't exclude any piece of the economy from us moving forward. We have to be ready to embrace every opportunity to move forward. I know a lot of people, and we're dead last in new business startup growth. Like, we're bad all around. Whether it's workers' rights in general, whether it's people who want to just start a new business, tech entrepreneurs, people don't see Wisconsin. Again, it comes back to that investing in higher education. It comes back to public transportation. It comes to many of the amenities that we don't offer as a state, in which we could, to attract younger people to Wisconsin. So whenever we're talking about job creation, whenever we're talking about the economy, we have to look at Wisconsin for the next 10 years, the next 25 years, quite frankly, the next 100 years. We haven't taken that long-term approach, and it means having people who are actively involved in it to be a part of it. Because so many of the conversations that involve, tech entrepreneurs, they don't really consider organized labor when they have those conversations, and that's a real problem. Elon Musk and all his ingenuity, super anti-union, right? But when we can work towards finding ways to collaborate to where new business leaders are understanding that an organized workforce is a much better workforce, a stronger workforce. I mean, Wisconsin can do something quite remarkable if only, we took the time to put it together.
We are almost out of time. You guys have given us a lot of answers to a lot of questions. Let me give you a quick question, and then we're going to go to your closing statements, which will also we'll move quickly through all this. But will yours be a voting rights administration?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I wish we could change it right now.
You do.
I wish we could change it right now. You think about all the things, I've said this probably 5 times today. The only thing that scares me about this race, we're ahead, we're going to win, is voter suppression. We have made it so difficult and so complex. I see it even in downtown Madison, relatively affluent place, but we also have lots of students there. You go there and, especially after they just moved in, the idea of a provisional vote doesn't connect. There are so many barriers. I've seen people walking out of the polls because they're frustrated. That is critical in that. I'll save my pitch on that till the end.
Well,
but it is an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's getting rid of voter ID, working to get us towards automatic voter registration, vote by mail, right? We should make voting as easy and accessible, as possible.
Well, you said you're going to save something for the end. Mandela, why don't you offer us a couple closing thoughts here, and then we'll let Tony Evers do the same.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mandela Barnes.
So once again, thank you all for coming out, and I hope that you have heard from the two of us that this is not going to be another anti-Scott Walker campaign. People have 8 years to realize how bad he has been for this state. I hope you've had the opportunity to listen to our vision and know that we are leading with that vision, knowing that we are taking our positive message all across this state to not just campaign in every county, but make sure that we campaign in every community. And it's not about the Obama-Trump voters. If they voted for Obama, then they voted for Trump, and they're still with him, you can keep them. What we have to get is the Obama no-show voter, the people who voted in 2008. The people who voted in 2008 or 2012 but didn't show up in 2016. And when they say, well, why didn't they show up in 2016? My response is always, well, why didn't the candidate show up? I'm telling you right now that I'm telling you right now that we're showing up. We're showing up in a real way. We're having those conversations, but Tony and I cannot do this alone. It's going to take everybody in this room to go out, again, talk to your friends, family members, neighbors. It's ideas, energy, and organizing. That is how we will win, and it's more than about winning. It's about winning and being effective. It's about being as bold as we can. It's about doing something for working people. It's about improving the lives of people across the state of Wisconsin. And so I present to you your new favorite sitcom, The Tony and Mandela Show. They never saw us coming.
Yeah, they never saw us coming. That's great. I tell you, Mandela Barnes is going to be the best lieutenant governor we've ever had in the state of Wisconsin. He is. And hell, he took a bunch of years off my life. I'm now 48 and a half years old. This is great. But we have great fun going across the state. Our energy is high. And I know part of this deal here today was to energize the people that were part of this process. And I thank you for doing this, and John's done a great job also tonight. But we have experienced it going across the state. We went out right after the primary for 2 days, 3 days across the state. We did it again this last week, and I'll just run through where we went. We went from Madison to Eau Claire, had an event to Eau Claire. We had 2 events in Hudson. We had 1 in Siren. Anybody know where Siren is? Yeah. All right. Superior, 2 events there. Ashland, 2 events. Rhinelander, Wausau, Stevens Point, and Portage. 2 days, and every day we had record crowds. Every day we had people just excited as all get out. People are jazzed about this campaign, and I think they are for several reasons. One, I think we're a great team, whether it's us or Sarah, who's running for treasurer, and this is your thing. You usually say this, I'll say it for you. We've actually seen excitement about the treasurer's race for the first time ever. And, of course, Josh Call, and, of course, Tammy. We are a good team, top to bottom. And the good news is we are going to win this race next November, and we're going to change the course of the state of Wisconsin. We're going to return to those important Wisconsin values, and we're going to take care of the major problems that we have in this state. This has been a good time, and I thank you so much for the opportunity. John, you did a great job. Thanks.
And before you give the final round of applause, 2 quick things. Number 1, we are in an AFSCME hall. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees was founded in Wisconsin by Arnold Zander and a handful of other state employees who believed that trade unions should be involved not merely in collective bargaining, but also in giving a forum for discussion and building out the commons and making our society function. So I thank AFSCME for giving us this hall tonight to have a discussion about how our state might move forward. I want to also thank the folks from our Wisconsin Revolution who are here with us tonight. And I want to, yes, you can give them a round of applause. I want to thank the folks from the Wisconsin Working Families Party who worked to put this event together. And I want to welcome Rebecca to the stage to tell people how they can take it to the next step.
Thank you so much. Hey, I'm Rebecca from the Wisconsin Working Families Party. Grace from our Wisconsin Revolution is going to come up too. Thank you all so much for coming. If you want to join WFP, we have member cards in the back, and Grace is going to tell us what to do next.
Awesome. So first, I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and for tuning in. We started here 10 months ago with a completely packed house, although let's be real, the majority of the people were probably running for governor that were here. But really, we've come so far. We've gone all over the state with Wisconsin's Choice. We have gotten thousands of people involved, and we've pushed these candidates to actually become the people's champion. So tonight, we're actually opening up our last vote. If you voted in prior rounds of Wisconsin's Choice, you kind of know the deal. But if you haven't, you can still vote. Essentially, what we're trying to do is we want you to reaffirm that you found your people's champion here and that you're ready to roll up your sleeves and get to work on spreading the importance of the issues that we've talked about here tonight and push people to get out and vote in November. So please go to www.wechoose.org to find the voting link if you are new to this process. But if not, you will be getting an email very shortly in your inbox with the voting link. It will be open until Friday night. It'll be open until Friday night. And then you can vote to reaffirm your pledge that you found your people's champion and you're ready to get to work. If we want to elect people that represent us, we really need to make our voices heard. That's why you need to get involved. Whether it's with our Wisconsin Revolution, with the Wisconsin's Choice Campaign, with the Wisconsin Working Families Party, or any organization of your choice, it is so important. So thank you all for being here. Again, thanks for tuning in. And yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody. One more round of applause for the candidates. One more round of applause for the people who asked questions tonight. I know there's some other folks who wanted to ask some more questions. The candidates will stick around for a little bit. And thank you all for participating in Wisconsin democracy. Solidarity, folks.